And our top story is the story that's been making news all over the world. WWDC, Apple's biggest event of the year till now. Loads of software update announcements along with 3 big and very surprising hardware announcements. Usually WWDC doesn't have hardware announcements. And I think the biggest one was Apple Silicon, the new processor called the M2. New redesigned MacBook Air has now been announced, which is powered by this M2. So the shape is completely different. The wedge shape is now gone, which I think is finally yes, please, because it's become so old. But the design is now very similar to the new MacBook Pro. It's only 11.3 mm thick and weighs a little over 1.2 kgs. Then the 13-inch MacBook Pro, also new, but it looks exactly the same. So same old design, same specs, just gets the new M2 processor, so not too exciting. Lots more happened out there. Let's take a look.
The WWDC 2022 was packed up to the brim when it came to updates. These updates were mostly in the form of software with loads and loads of quality of life improvements in iOS, iPadOS and macOS. But with all this, it does not mean that there were no hardware announcements. There were 2 very exciting ones and one that was rather confusing. Let's start with the 2 exciting ones, shall we? Apple announced the next generation of their SoC called the M2. It's built with the same target, providing the maximum power with maximum possible efficiency. It has a 50% higher bandwidth speed of 100 GB per second than the M1. The unified memory of the graphics and RAM will now go up to 24 GB instead of 16 GB M1 is capable of. And when it comes to performance, it will be 18% faster than M1 while consuming the same power and can be even faster overall when it consumes higher wattage. And the first product to get the M2 is a redesigned MacBook built around the M2, which is the new MacBook Air. Gone is the wedge shape. This new MacBook Air looks like an extremely slimmed down version of the new MacBook Pros. 11.3 mm slim to be exact. It also weighs just 1.2 kgs. The corners are curved with the lid flattened. It comes in 4 colors: space grey, silver, starlight and midnight. It supports MagSafe fast charging, has 2 USB-C ports and a high impedance headphone jack on the other side. The keyboard looks very similar to the one on the MacBook Pro. The speakers are integrated behind the keyboard, which means no perforation on the sides of the keyboard. As for the display, it has a notch with slimmer bezels, taking the size to 13.6 inches. It is 25% brighter than the previous MacBook Air. And the notch also houses the new 1080p webcam, the same as the new MacBook Pro. Purely in terms of performance, it is 25% faster in performance than the previous MacBook Air, 20% faster with photo editing, 40% faster and better with video editing. It sports a fanless design and the battery life is very much the same as the M1 MacBook Air. But the price is not the same. This MacBook Air is more expensive at 1,19,900. This is something expected, but at the same time, it is not as easy to recommend it as it was for the M1 MacBook Air when it was launched. And the M1 MacBook Air, in a very weird move, is now more expensive, as it costs 99,900 instead of its launch price of 92,900. Now, time for the less exciting upgrade, the 13-inch MacBook Pro. It is completely unchanged in its design, display and battery. The only change is the M2 processor, which gives it the same upgrades that the M2 MacBook Air has in terms of performance, power, RAM and graphics, but everything else remains the same. It starts at 1,29,900, which ends up making it pretty pointless. It does not make sense for most people over the M2 MacBook Air, and if you were to upgrade it, the price is a lot closer to the 14-inch MacBook Pro, which will be a much better laptop in every aspect. And that's it. The hardware announcements were interesting and exciting for the most part, except the one which made little sense, as a 13-inch MacBook Pro will be sticking out like a sore thumb in the lineup. But at the same time, M2, however minor of an upgrade it may seem to be, continues to change what an average everyday machine is capable of doing. We are excited to try it out and even more excited to showcase our experience with it to you.